All right, today we're jumping into a really dramatic and honestly a pretty deep story from the second chapter of Matthew. We're talking about the Holy Family's flight to Egypt. It's a story packed with danger, divine intervention, and all these incredible echoes of history. So yeah, let's get right into it. So right off the bat, we're hit with this huge paradox that's really at the heart of the whole thing. We're told a king has been born, the Messiah everyone's been waiting for. So why on earth does his story immediately become one about a desperate escape? Why would a newborn king have to flee for his life and become a refugee? That's the core question we're going to unpack.
The answer? Well, it starts with a threat from another king. So for this first part, we're going to focus on that immediate danger, this kind of clash of kingdoms that forces this young family to basically become fugitives.
So here's the moment it all kicks off. The wise men have just left, and they've accidentally tipped off the super paranoid King Herod. Then, in the middle of the night, an angel shows up in Joseph's dream with this urgent life-or-death message. Get up, take the child and his mother, and run. This isn't just some friendly advice. It's like a heavenly emergency alert.
And I think this slide just frames the conflict so perfectly. On one side, you've got King Herod. He's ruling from a palace, he's totally consumed by fear, and he's using all his earthly power to just destroy anything he sees as a threat. And then on the other side, you have King Jesus, born in a humble manger, embodying hope and holding a kind of divine authority that Herod couldn't even begin to understand. It's the ultimate showdown between power built on fear and power rooted in love.
So, with that threat established, the family flees. And their destination? A country that has a really, really long and complicated history with the people of Israel, Egypt.
And Joseph's reaction is just immediate. There's no hesitation, no second guessing. He just gets up, and under the cover of darkness, he takes his family on this incredibly dangerous journey to Egypt. It really shows you his incredible faith, but also the sheer peril of their situation. I mean, they are now refugees looking for political asylum. Which brings us to a really crucial question. Right? I mean, they could have gone anywhere. So why Egypt? Was it just the closest safe place to cross the border? Or was there something more going on? Well, the author, Mathew, definitely wants us to see that this destination was anything but random.
And this is where the story shifts from just being about a dramatic escape to being a really profound theological statement. For Matthew, this whole flight to Egypt is about fulfilling a prophecy and connecting the story of Jesus directly to the larger story of Israel.
And here it is. This is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Matthew quotes the prophet Hosea, saying this all happened to fulfill what the Lord had spoken. Out of Egypt I called my son. Now the thing is, Hosea was originally talking about the nation of Israel being called out of slavery during the Exodus. So what is Matthew doing here, applying it to one person, to Jesus?
Well, he's using a really cool literary and theological tool called typology. Basically, it's the idea that key events and people in the Old Testament are like patterns, or types, that hint at and find their ultimate meaning in Jesus. So in this view, history isn't just random, it's rhyming, and Jesus is the fulfillment of that poem. This next slide just lays out that parallel brilliantly. The nation of Israel, they were called God's son. They found refuge in Egypt centuries before. And they were called out of Egypt in the massive event we know as the Exodus. So Matthew is arguing that Jesus, as the ultimate Son of God, is now reliving and, in a way, perfecting that very same story. His personal exodus from Egypt marks him as the true embodiment of his people.
But of course, the story doesn't just end in Egypt. The family eventually has to make the long and still pretty dangerous journey back home.
And just like a dream started their exile, another dream is what ends it. Once the tyrant Herod is finally dead, the angel comes back to Joseph, gives him the all-clear, and tells him to go back to Israel. That same divine guidance that protected them on the way out is now leading them back home.
Man, this timeline really puts the whole journey into perspective. From that first warning in Bethlehem to the exile in Egypt, but even when they get back, they face more danger. They hear that Herod's son, who's just as brutal, is now in charge, so another warning sends them north to Galilee, where they finally settle in Nazareth. Which, by the way, fulfills another prophecy. It's like every single step is filled with danger, but also guided by this divine purpose.
So after all that, the flight, the exile, the prophecies, what's the big takeaway? Why was it so important for Matthew to include this specific story in his gospel? See, Matthew is building a case here almost like a lawyer for his readers. You can see his method. He takes a historical event, the flight to Egypt, and then he immediately connects it to prophecy. The whole purpose is to prove that Jesus is the real Messiah of Israel, and the conclusion he wants his audience to reach is that Jesus' life, even the most dangerous and chaotic parts, was all part of a divine plan that was set in motion centuries ago.
You've got to remember who Matthew was writing for. His primary audience was Jewish, and they were steeped in the Hebrew Scriptures. To them, this would have been incredibly powerful. This wasn't just a nice story. It was evidence. It was proof that this man, Jesus, was the one their entire history had been pointing towards. His identity wasn't some accident. It was a destiny that was foretold.
And that kind of leaves us with a final, fascinating thought to chew on. We've seen how Matthew weaves together what happened in history with what was written in prophecy. So it really makes you ask, right? What does it mean if the foundation of a story isn't just what happened, but this deep belief that it was always meant to happen? It really changes how you look at everything. Thanks so much for watching.